following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Call to order the August 6th quasi-judicial meeting of the Cary Town Council. And at this time, I'd ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're at agenda item 1.2, the adoption of our agenda. Is there a motion to adopt a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Our only quasi-judicial public hearing is for Wendy's at Bradford. An overview of the hearings and procedures and detailed rules are attached to the printed agenda. All speakers who want to speak during the public hearing must be administered an oath by Mrs. Johnson, who is to my right. We'll pause a moment to allow those individuals who would like to speak at the public hearing to approach Mrs. Johnson and receive their oaths. I'm going to pause the meeting at this time and not say or do anything until that has been completed.
Look forward to that one day. Pretty sure I still want to be here.
I'll now ask if any council member has had any site visits, ex parte communications, financial relationships, specialized knowledge, or close relationship to an affected person to disclose. Starting on my left with Mr. Urha.
I have not, sir.
Ms. Bush.
I have not.
Mr. France.
I ate at Wendy's on Maynard today.
I don't think that's going to count.
Okay.
I have not. Mr. Smith.
Nor have I. I have
Mrs.
not.
Robinson. All right, very good. Based on the disclosures we've heard from our council members, I'd invite anyone to the podium at this time who's been sworn in to speak if you have an objection to a council member's participation in this hearing. Seeing no one, we'll continue, and I'll open the quasi-judicial public hearing. Mr. Loveland of our staff will introduce this hearing. Mr. Loveland.
Good evening, Council. This is an item for a request for a restaurant, being a Wendy's restaurant, in the Bradford Development The proposed development is on a 1-acre parcel located in the Bradford overall development north of High House Road, east of Davis Drive. The item requires council approval due to the presence of a proposed drive-through. Bradford, as I mentioned, is located on the corner of High House Road and Davis Drive. Those are both designated as major thoroughfares on the Comprehensive Transportation Plan. The site is due west of Magnus Drive, which is the internal public street that serves Bradford. This is designated as a local street and is south of Bradford View Drive, which is a private local street. The development is located along, or there is an existing transportation route along High House Road. There is an existing transit stop located on the north side of High House Road on the frontage of Bradford. That's approximately 100 feet west of out parcel 5, which is where the proposed Wendy's is located. The facilities master plan designates a street side trail along the northern side of High House Road along the frontage of Bradford that has been installed along the frontage of this property and extends all the way to the intersection of High House and Davis Drive. This site is located in the Cornerstone Mixed-Use Overlay District and is regulated by the Cornerstone or the Bradford Mixed-Use Sketch Plan. This sketch plan does allow commercial uses on out parcel 5, which is the proposed out parcel for the Wendy's. The mixed-use sketch plan was approved by council in 2007. It does allow the development of 3 out parcels with a drive-through, 2 of which can be restaurants. You may recall council approved one of those drive-throughs in January of this year for the Union Bank, which was on Lot 1. That is currently under construction. This is a view from High House Road looking north into the site. You can see the existing Publix restaurant in the rear, or excuse me, grocery store in the rear of the photo there, and the multifamily building beyond that. The site has already been cleared and graded. That was done when the initial construction for Bradford took place. You can see the existing retaining wall there along High House. There's also a retaining wall along Magnus Drive, which is on the right-hand side of this picture. Those walls will remain. You can see the existing streetscape, which was planted there when Bradford was developed. There is also an existing streetscape along Magnus Drive. The applicant is proposing a 3,231 square foot restaurant, 34 parking spaces on the site. There is, of course, one proposed drive-through, comes around the building, a ordering station here, pickup window here on the site. There are 2 access points into the site, one being on the western property line. That's a shared access point that the property out parcel 4, which is currently vacant, will share use of when that develops. The site has a one-way circulation pattern and has an egress point on the northwest corner. That's exiting traffic only. The pedestrian connections are from Bradford View Drive, which is the northern local street, and to the property to the west. The site will have a sidewalk that stubs to the western property line, and that will include a connection to High House Road once out parcel 4 develops. The building facades will incorporate a light color brick, which is the same brick type that's used and featured predominantly through Bradford development. It also features the distinctive red blade that is used commonly in other Wendy's restaurants. It is burgundy brick in this application instead of the metal blade that you'll see on some other Wendy's locations. They're also using or utilizing a cast stone masonry and 2 horizontal bands that appear on all 4 facades. There are no modification requests in this applicant's request that require council's action. And that concludes staff's initial presentation, and I'll return after the applicant and public have presented testimony to present my final conclusions.
Thank you. This time, we'll call on the applicant's attorney to present arguments and evidence in support of the application. application by addressing the applicable approval criteria.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jason Barron with Morningstar, here on behalf of the applicant in this case. Here with me tonight is Mr. Garrett Otten of Commercial Site Design. They have provided the engineering and land planning associated with this matter and have prepared the plans that have been submitted to the town. Also here is Mr. Reinald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp & Associates. They have performed engineering associated with transportation. And then finally, Mr. Jeff Furman of Raven Partners is here to testify on behalf of this application. Raven is the master developer of Bradford and has been the master developer since this project's inception. A little bit of background is, as Doug mentioned, the reason we're before you all tonight isn't because there's a request for minor modification. The plan complies with the requirements of the ordinance. The issue relates to the town's requirement that any use that includes a drive-through comes to council for approval. If you recall, that was a product of the town's repeal of the APFO and then subsequent additional site plan standards. Just briefly, as you all are well aware at this point, this is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Our job is to present evidence related to the findings of the ordinance, and we intend to do that. As you all are aware, if we present evidence in support of the application and there isn't competing evidence, the applicant's entitled to approval as a matter of law. That is good standing North Carolina law, and ultimately, in a quasi-judicial proceeding, that's our job. That's what we're here to do. With respect to forecast of the evidence, what you're going to hear tonight, what you're going to hear is that this use complies with the requirements of the ordinance. You're going to hear that from our engineers. You're going to hear that from our experts. And if you review the staff observations, you're going to hear that from the staff as well. You're also going to hear that a drive-through at this location in this development was always contemplated as part of the plan. As Doug mentioned, the project was originally approved for a maximum of 3 drive-throughs on the site, and currently this would be the second one. It also permits a maximum of 2 drive-throughs associated with restaurant uses. So again, this is something that has always been part of the Bradford mixed-use sketch plan, and this is just in furtherance of that. At this point, I'm going to call Garrett Otten, who will provide engineering associated with this plan. Thank you.
Good evening. Garrett Otten of Commercial Site Design in Raleigh, North Carolina, professional engineer for Wendy's Restaurants. Over the past 5 years, I've been involved with a multitude of projects as a land planning and engineering consultant in this market. As Mr. Barron noted, I'm here to testify that the requirements for approval as set forth in Land Development Ordinance Section 3.9.2I have been satisfied. In regards to the first standard for approval, it is my opinion that the site plan complies with all applicable requirements of the ordinance, including the development and design standards of Chapter 7 and 8, as well as the dedication and improvements provisions of Chapter 8, as well as all applicable town specifications. The proposed site plan that we have before you here includes a restaurant building of just over 3,200 square feet. The site is part of the Bradford mixed-use development, and it was previously approved for this out parcel to have a 4,000 square foot office or retail use, which we're compliant with. The restaurant proposes a drive-through service, and we feel that this portion of Bradford development is ideal for a drive-through use, given the proximity to Magnus Drive and High House Road, which is a majorly traveled thoroughfare. I think it should also be noted that the original traffic impact analysis for Bradford assumed that a drive-through would be used on this parcel. In regards to the second standard for approval, it is my opinion that the plan adequately protects other property or residential uses on the same property from the potential adverse effects of the proposed development. There are new residential uses in close proximity to this proposed restaurant. As you can see on our site plan here, there's a 30-foot streetscape along High House Road. There's additional internal plantings and evergreen shrub row that screens the vehicular use area and the drive-through area. Additionally, shade trees are provided to meet the town of Cary landscaping requirements. In regards to the third standard for approval, it is my opinion that the plan provides harmony and unity with the development of nearby properties. As noted by staff, the Wendy's prototype building was modified to incorporate the same brick and same accent colors as the Publix shopping center, as well as other non-residential developments in this shopping center. The building is separated from High House Road with a 30-foot streetscape, which will also apply to the other properties along High House Road. This will provide a consistent spatial relationship between those buildings and the road. And finally, this use is consistent with the originally planned 4,000 square foot of commercial use. In regards to the fourth standard for approval, it is my opinion that the plan provides safe conditions for pedestrians or motorists and prevents a dangerous arrangement of pedestrian and vehicular ways. If you'll notice on the site plan, there's sidewalks provided on all four sides of the site, including the mixed-use path along High House. We provided a stub to the out parcel to the left, and a direct connection will be provided via sidewalk once that parcel is developed. The plan provides for the required vehicular stacking for the drive-through lane. Access to the site for vehicular users is provided via a shared two-way driveway on the west side of the site, which will be shared with the adjacent out parcel number 4, and also a one-way exit-only driveway at the northeastern portion of the site. In regards to the fifth standard for approval, it is my opinion that the plan provides a safe ingress and egress for emergency vehicles to the site. The site driveways and vehicular use area meet all dimensional standards in the Town of Cary Code and will be sufficient for emergency access. This concludes my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, Mr. Mayor, we'll call Reinald Stevenson of Ramey Kemp and Associates.
Good evening. My name is Reinald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp and Associates, 5808 Farrington Place, Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of North Carolina. Been with Ramey Kemp and Associates since 2001, doing a variety of projects, all transportation related, to transportation planning, to engineering and design projects. I've worked on numerous projects, commercial development projects similar to Bradford. We prepared a study, a brief study for this particular project to look at the trip generation potential for the proposed Wendy's, as well as the operations capacity analysis operations at the intersection of High House and Magnus Drive. And what we found in the study was that as you've heard previously, that this particular use is actually a little smaller than the size of a fast food restaurant that was considered in the original TAR report, a traffic study done for the overall Bradford development. So consequently, the trip generation for this particular Wendy's restaurant would be lower and is lower than the trip generation in the original traffic study for the approved master plan development. In addition, the intersection of High House and Magnus Drive was analyzed, and it was found that that intersection was operating at an acceptable level of service. There did not appear to be any congestion issues at that intersection, and this proposed site would not add or create any congestion or capacity issues at the intersection. So based on the findings of the study, the proposed plan will mitigate for traffic congestion impacts that are expected to be generated by the project. Also like to point out too that the development has already made several roadway improvements in this area that were to accommodate the traffic that was associated with full build out of the development. And obviously the development is not built out at this time, but the road improvements have been put in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, Mr. Mayor, I'll call Mr. Jeff Furman of Raven Partners.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Furman. My address is 3817 Chippenham Road, Durham, North Carolina, 27707. I'm an officer of Bradford 2 SPE LLC, which is the developer of the retail phase. Mine comments are very short, and it's that the overall plan, this use meets the mix of uses that were envisioned, and that is accurate. We envision Bradford to be a multifamily and commercial project, retail primarily and office. And fortunately, we landed the area's first Publix, I guess a couple years ago, and we've had that open for business. It's doing very well, and we always envisioned a flourishing complement of shops and out parcels for the Publix, and I'm happy to say that we've had better interest than we hoped. The shops are almost full. We have one vacancy, and the activity on the out parcels has been fantastic. We had always hoped for restaurants. We actually have a 6 restaurant limitation from the deal with Publix, and all of those spaces are spoken for. So that kind of ties into that this use was envisioned. Again, we hope to have complementary uses, so the 390 multifamily units, what we'll have is overall about 150,000 feet of retail. And so what we see now, the events coming to the plaza on Fridays and Saturdays, the people that live in the apartments walking, the neighbors walking on some of the pathways that we built into the center. And then as far as addressing harmony and unity, again, some of this is redundant, but what we hope to have in mixed use were the vibrant retail, the multifamily, so seeing that community node where people are out and shoppers are there and families gather, and that is all taking place now, and we think Wendy's will just make that better. Thank you.
Thank you.
That will conclude our case in chief, Mr. Mayor. Again, I just want to reiterate, as a quasi-judicial hearing, I think what you've heard, in addition, and I think you're going to hear from the staff, is there are no code compliance issues per se. And I do think it's important as it relates to the drive-through. You know, there isn't a standard that we have to satisfy to justify the drive-through as a standalone issue associated with the case. I mean, the reason why we're here is because the site plan ordinance says if you have a drive-through, you come here. As it relates to the overall plan for development of the site, what you heard from the engineer, what you heard from Jeff Furman, is that a drive-through, and what you heard from the staff, a drive-through was always contemplated for this particular site. So this is just a logical extension of what was the originally planned overall development for Bradford. And at that, we will conclude our testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. This time I'll invite other speakers who have been sworn in and wish to speak in support of the application to approach the podium. Anyone at all? Seeing no one, will continue, and I'll invite cross-examination of the witnesses who have already testified in support of the request. See no one, we'll open the public hearing to those who are opposed to the request, and I would invite those speakers forward. Seeing no one, will continue, and I'll call again on town staff for testimony they wish to add.
Again, this requires, that's been said several times now, is requiring council approval due to the drive-through. There are no modification requests that require council action. The site plan is consistent with the Bradford mixed-use sketch plan. There were some, or are some, restrictions in that plan that are placed on this property, principally the number of drive-throughs limited to 3, or 2 of those for restaurant uses. As I indicated, one of those have already been approved for bank use on out parcel 1. This would be the second, leaving one allocation for a drive-through, whether it was a restaurant or otherwise, remaining past this point, should council approve this request. There is a minimum and maximum gross floor area requirements or provisions for Bradford, the minimum being 100,000 of commercial, 7,500 of office. They are currently at 88,000 square feet of commercial and 4.5 approximately 1,000 square feet of office space if you include this development as well as the bank, which is currently under development, which is where that office is coming from. The maximums are far in excess of that, approximately 160,000 square feet max of commercial and about 10,000 square feet of office, although you can flex those numbers somewhat. There are also landscape requirements in the mixed-use sketch plan. As we mentioned, there's a 30-foot streetscape along High House Road. That was put in place at the initial development of the Bradford. They will need to supplement that with some landscaping to bring it up to code, which they will be required to do and will comply with. 15-foot streetscape along Magnus, which is in place, but again, there'll be some supplementing. And as Mr. Otten said, while there is no requirement to landscape along Bradford View Drive or the internal line, they are providing evergreen shrubs to screen the parking lot and the drive-through lane from the adjacent property lines. That completes staff presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions during council deliberation, should you have any.
Okay, thank you. This time I'll ask if anyone that's been sworn in has any objections to the competency of any evidence of testimony. No. Proceeding. Does either staff or the other parties believe there's a need or a warrant to continue this hearing? Nope. All right. So now we can begin the deliberative phase of the hearing, and I'll open it up to council members for comments and questions. I have just one clarification I'll ask our attorney, Mr. Silverstein. It's the drive-through that brought this to us tonight, but we're evaluating the site plan. Is that correct? Just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
It does say site plan, yes.
Okay.
The site plan also requires approval from council. It is the drive-through that triggered this becoming an item before council. But since it is before council, you're approving the site plan, correct?
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. And since that is the case, I have two clarifications I need from Mr. Barron or someone that has testified. The first one, I thought I heard the traffic engineer say that congestion was, there was a level of service congestion that was acceptable, and then later I heard him testify that the information was based on build-out, and I want to make sure that was true, that I heard that correctly, that those traffic measurements, projections were based on build-out.
Yeah, the analysis that we did at the intersection was actually based on the traffic that was there plus the traffic from this site.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And then, I don't know which one wants to address the pedestrians, the site plan.
Yes.
The site plan, let's go back one that has a color picture. I can't remember which slide that is. There you go. So there's sidewalks all around this. However, from High House Road, there's no access that I see from a sidewalk. You have to go all the way around the building or cut through the grass to get to a sidewalk.
That's correct. Our site has about an 8-foot elevation difference from where it's built down to the mixed-use path along High House. We simply don't have the way to make an accessible pathway within our parcel to make that walkway happen. Staff made it a condition of our site plan that we provide a stub to the southwest corner to the adjacent out parcel, and that out parcel would be required to continue that sidewalk to High House Road when they develop.
Okay.
Continuing on the pedestrian, so there's an 8-foot difference in grade from High House to the site right there. Thank you. Whoever took that panoramic, look how the Bradford got on. So that's a panoramic picture. So I understand why there's no access from High House, but you could go, going back to your other sheet, you can walk up Magnus, right? But the access is way at the end. Does that grade level off? Or does the pedestrian have to walk all the way up Magnus and then cross over drive-through traffic and walk through a parking lot to enter? It seems...
The retaining wall continues, I would say, approximately 80% up the frontage of Magnus Drive. So that difference in elevation does continue up Magnus Drive.
Okay, so I guess I'm not a big fan of having pedestrians walk through an entire, especially with a drive-through. Is that the entrance to the drive-through or the exit?
That's the exit drive-through.
The exit. I'm not a real big fan of the way that's laid out.
That's the entrance right there.
Because the entrance is way in the front, so they have to walk
yeah.
all the way to the back, then they have to walk all the way back to the front. It's just it doesn't seem like a very good plan for the pedestrian. I would hope that you'd look at that, what other options there might be available, because I can just see
We
this
certainly have
being a-
explored a number of options, and in our discussions with staff, we think that when the connection is made to High House with the development of out parcel 4, and additionally, we expect a lot of the pedestrian traffic to come from internal to the shopping center, which we have a direct path to the rest of the shopping center northwest of our site. We feel that there's going to be sufficient access for pedestrians.
So I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that once the out parcel that's west, right, to the left, thank you, to the, I was trying to figure out which way is which. To the left of that is developed, you're going to have an at-grade sidewalk entrance? Is that what you're thinking, or
Yes,
less of a grade?
Yes, we don't have a design for that yet. That'll be designed by the developer of that out parcel.
Have you already thought about how the access will be? Because now you're going to be crossing drive-through entrance.
Well, we do have a crosswalk. I'm not sure if we can zoom in, but there is a crosswalk there with pedestrian ramps that will allow for
Oh, it's not on
traffic
this
to
map.
cross.
It's on something
It
else.
doesn't show very well on this slide, and
I don't
I
see it on
can't
the
zoom
slide.
in, but there's a ramp at these two locations.
Okay.
Why don't they just connect, why don't y'all just connect the sidewalk right there to the right of where your arrow is now, down to the High House Road sidewalk?
Now, rather than waiting.
Yeah,
So we-
Well,
What's the grade difference, I guess, on the western property line?
it's about, like I said, it's about 8 feet.
Still 8 feet?
Yeah, and there would be no way to make an ADA compliant sidewalk without doing a massive switchback that would just take up all of that streetscape there.
Okay.
Other questions? If council's ready for a motion, we'll close the public comment portion, and I'll close the public hearing. Well, first I need a motion before I close the public hearing.
Say what?
A motion for,
Motion?
to
You're looking for
close
a
the
motion?
public hearing?
No, sorry. In quasi-judicial, all of this is inside the public hearing. Before I close the public hearing, we need to make a decision on the site plan. So therefore, I'm asking for a motion to either approve or deny the site plan.
For the reasons discussed, I move that we approve the proposed site plan with conditions as stated, as it meets all the approval criteria set forth in section 3.9.2I of the LDO, and that this approval be conditioned upon the following: that the applicant must satisfactorily address all remaining Development Review Committee comments on the master plan as submitted for signature.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Motion carries 5-1. So at this time, if there's no other items left undone, Mr. Silverstein, I'll close the public hearing and thank everyone for their time here this evening. And a reminder for those who follow our public notices, we will adjourn this meeting and take a small break, and then we'll reconvene in a special meeting in conference room 10035. And the purpose of that meeting is to receive proposals from consultants for the recruitment of a town manager. And after the presentation of proposals, council will discuss and we may take action. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, we pass unanimously and we are adjourned.
I'm not worried about it.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.